Hi there. Let's add a quiz to a course. I've logged into Moodle and I'm sitting in the course that I want to add my quiz in. Since I'm editing my course, I know up here at the top right, I'm going to turn editing on. I'm going to suddenly see all these little move tools appear. And on the right side, I see edit all over. I'm going to scroll to the section of the course where I want my quiz to appear. For my purposes, I'm going to put it in my Moodle Quizzes section. On the right, where it says add an activity or resource, I'm going to click there, and either in all or in my activities or starred, all of those, anywhere you see quiz, it's all the same. So I'm adding a quiz, and this is the section where we're going to set or assign the settings to our quiz. We aren't actually going to be adding any questions at this point, and that's going to come in a second video. I'm calling it New Quiz. In the description area is where I would put things like you're required 50% on this quiz to move on, or completion of this quiz is required to write your theory quiz, or this is your theory quiz and you need at least 80% to be successful. Any of that could go in that description section. Now let's zip through the settings, and I apologize, this is going to be fairly quick, but there's a lot here. Under timing, this is where you can open and close your quiz if you want to designate open and close dates. If it's a practice quiz, I probably wouldn't bother with that. But obviously, any of your theory exams or any if you're in a teacher-paced course where you know, for instance, let's say I want this quiz to be available from April, let's go 18th, and it'll yell at you if you have those so that they're not in the right order, to April 20th, let's say, and the times don't matter for what I'm doing here. That's going to mean the quiz is going to appear on the course page. Students can see it, but if they try and open it outside of that timeline, it's going to tell them this course is not available at the moment. You can also choose to set a time limit. For simple true and false or multiple choice questions, probably 2 or 3 minutes per question is oodles. But again, that's going to vary depending on your content and your students and so on. And I'm going to leave that for your expertise, not mine. And when the time expires, you've got options in here. The first one says open attempts are submitted automatically. There's a grace period where you can submit things if you haven't, but you can't answer questions, or the time just expires. Now, if you think about what those mean, I prefer the top one. What that means is, let's say a student forgot they have a quiz in this time period between April 18th and 20th, and they jump on the computer towards the end, and they're writing away, and the time period ends. If we have this one set where attempts must be submitted or they're not counted, bang, the time ends and they get no credit for anything they've done to that point. Even if they've done 9 out of 10 questions, they get nothing. If we go to this second one where there's a grace period, that would mean it's probably going to pop up on the screen that you have a grace period, and you can set that grace period as long as you want to hit submit, but they can't answer that last question. I prefer this one. Open attempts are submitted automatically, which means if they hit the end of the time period, whatever they have completed gets submitted. So if they had 9 out of 10 questions, that gets submitted for them automatically. The beauty of that is if a student answers the entire quiz and for whatever reason forgets to hit submit, when the time period ends, those will automatically be submitted. My students have been saved by that, they tell me, a few times, where they wrote the quiz and just closed the computer and totally forgot to hit submit. Let's talk about the grade setting. If you're using categories, this is one place you can designate it. Most of you should not be using categories, so don't worry about that. You don't need to set a grade to pass. I want to talk about attempts allowed. If it's a practice quiz, leave this set unlimited. Probably let them write it as often as they want. If this is an official summary activity of some sort and you want them to only have one try, this is where you would set that to 1. If for some reason it's a quiz you want to give them more than one attempt at, and lots of mine are set unlimited if they are mastery quizzes as well, you can also control how it calculates the grade based on their attempts. I typically leave it at highest grade. Layout. This is going to talk about what the students see while they're writing the quiz. It defaults to a new page for every question. I don't do that. I change it to all questions on one page. When you start adding questions, we can put in page breaks there instead. This ends up, if you don't care, if you build a 10-question quiz and all 10 questions on one page is fine, that does this. If you leave it at every question, one advantage to that, or what I hear is one advantage to that, is it makes it far more difficult for students to cheat. So that's also something to think about. If a student, for instance, wanted to sneak their cell phone out and take pictures of every question and hoped you weren't seeing, having only one question on the screen at the time is going to make that a lot more difficult. So there's pros and cons to both ends of that. Navigation method, leave that on free. Question behavior, and there's a few things in here. Shuffle within questions, leave that set to yes. That's going to move the choices around into multiple choice. So the students can't memorize, I go A, B, B, A, and so on. So leave that to yes. How questions behave, most of you want this on deferred feedback, which is the default. That's going to just control when students can see how they're doing as they go. There are lots of options in here. Deferred means they write the whole quiz, they submit it, then they can go back and review and see how they've done. Each attempt builds on the last, leave that at no. Now this deferred feedback ties directly into our review options. In our review options right now, during the attempt, they can't see right answers or feedback or any of that. But immediately after they hit submit, they can go back in and review. Now, if you don't want them to ever see what the right answer is for the questions that they get incorrect, this is where you can take out the right answer. You could shut that off so that they can't see what the right answer is, so they, again, can't generate an answer key for a quiz. It's also useful if you want to force your students, no, go back to the coursework and read it again and find that right answer, which builds learning, of course. Now, after the quiz is closed, if this section over here, is grayed out entirely, that means, and I'm going to go up here and shut off this close date for a minute so that happens. If this is grayed out, that just means the quiz never closes, so it doesn't apply. That means the quiz is always open and they can see their information. If, however, you have a close date set, this is going to turn on, shall we say. And again, if you want to control what students can see after the quiz is closed, that is where you do that. And I would almost always shut off the right answer there, perhaps, because especially if you have students that are going to be writing at different times, so that, again, a student can't show another student what's in there. Appearance. Irrelevant. Unless you care about decimal places in grades and things, I wouldn't worry about changing anything in there. As far as I know, I don't know how to use it. So if someone else is using the Safe Exam browser, maybe let's have a chat and you can show me how that works. I've never had access to one to play with it enough to know. Extra restrictions on attempts. And I'm going to open this up more. I use this a little bit, and that's going to depend on you and what's going on with, you could require a password for them to get into a quiz, where they would have to literally get a password from you to type in order to get into that. You could set a delay between attempts. Again, there are so many different things that come up and different creative ideas that instructors have. If you ever wonder about any of these things, holler and I can help you with that. Common module settings. If you're in the process of building a quiz and you know students are going to start clicking on it and you don't want them to see it, under availability, you can hide it. You could hide that until you're done building it. If, remember, up at the top, if you've set an availability that's in the future anyway, then you don't need to do that. They're going to see it, but they won't be able to do anything. So I wouldn't stress about that too much. Restrict access. There are all sorts of ways that you could restrict access. I'm going to open this for a second. Activity completion, for instance, or a grade, you could set a particular quiz to not open until they get a required score in a different quiz, or until they finish reading something else you've put in the course. There are lots of ways that you can control that. User profile, you could actually build a quiz that you only want one student to see, and you could restrict the access to only the user with the following name. Whoops, I did not mean to click on that. Activity completion, none of you are worrying about that, so leave it alone. So at that point, I think we're good. And what you would do down here If you're ready, you figure to start adding questions to it, hit save and display, and it's going to take you to the quiz, and it's going to first of all tell you, hey, this is not available until such and such a day and time. It's going to say that you've set a time limit. It's going to tell you how you've set the grading, but there's no questions. And that's what we're going to do in the next video.